Wolves are incredible creatures that shape entire ecosystems, allowing forests to flourish, rivers to rejuvenate, and all the animals around them to thrive. But throughout history, and still to this day, where wolves live, they're wrongly villainised, portrayed as evil, a menace which must be killed. Here in the UK, we have eradicated our wild wolf populations, along with our other large apex land predators, and along with some other pretty damaging landscape practices. We ended up with our most wild areas looking like this: barren, empty, and treeless. These are deserts. These are biological deserts, before we get any keyboard warriors going down in the comments being like, since when do we have deserts in Scotland? Much like arid and dry deserts, little life can persist through these lands. But unlike arid and dry deserts, there is a forgotten past that is just waiting to come back if we allow it. And although in this video we are going to be talking about wolves, I want to say this from the start, and I want to get this in early. Unless wolves want to do a doggy paddle across the North Sea, they are not going to make it back here unless we make it happen. And as you'll find out throughout the course of this video, there are so many good things that wolves will bring back to Scotland. It's just that there's also a lot of work that needs to be done before that can happen. But I'm hopeful that we can do it, and we will see wolves again. You know, I have never been so happy, I have never been so tired, I have never been so stressed out in all my life. There's a lot been going on with this channel, whether if I'm writing, if I'm planning, out filming videos, editing them. You know, when I'm not doing YouTube work, I'm also looking after my young family. I've got two young kids, boy and a girl, under the age of 3. It's fair to say that the last couple of years have been pretty chaotic. You know, I more than rely on my morning coffee to kickstart my day, and that's why I was very intrigued when Magic Mind reached out to me to try this little green drink. Now, this green drink promises a sharper mind, lower stress, and better energy. And I've been drinking this now for maybe like the past month, but I'll never forget when I first initially tried it, right? So I've been drinking this after my morning coffee. So I have my morning coffee, I also drink a little bit of water to hydrate, and then I drink this like sort of later on in the morning. It's quite like a citrusy, like earthy, like matcha. It's got matcha in there. It's like a matcha flavor. But what happened is after I initially tried this, I kid you not, that very first same day, I felt more locked in during the afternoon. I didn't get that like afternoon grog, that afternoon fog where you just can't be bothered. And look, I'm not saying that every day has been like that, but this is definitely now something which I do every day to just help me gain a slight edge in this chaotic and hectic life. If you want to learn more about Magic Mind, I'll leave a link to them in the description. You can go to their website, and if you want to try this as a one-time purchase, use the code LEAVE20 to get 20% off. But if you want to do a subscription and start taking this more regularly, I think you can get up to like 46% off. If you want to have a slightly more magical mind, go and see what they can offer you. If it's not clear to you already, Scotland's empty hills, its barren landscapes, its naked rivers, they really shouldn't be like this. They look like this because man has shaped them over the course of thousands of years. First, its vast, thriving native forest would have been cut down for the persistence of agriculture. And then what would have happened is we would have slowly but surely picked off many of the animals which inhabited these forests. So your bears, your wolves, your lynx, but not just your predators. Creatures like the elk and the bison would have been part of Scotland's landscapes. And this degradation happened over thousands of years, so quite a long time. It's really important for us to consider these long time scales when we're thinking about how the landscape and how the ecology can change. Caledonian pine forest is a habitat which should be covering much of the country. We think that it's declined by more than 97%. And on the hills, up on the hills, don't be fooled, trees can grow up here. Mountain birch is the habitat which forms up on the hill. It really is a lost habitat here in Scotland. And why is this? Well, it's for a number of reasons, but one massive contributing factor is that there is one group of animals which is roaming free across the Scottish landscapes, and that is deer. There are 4 deer species in Scotland, but the 2 big ones are roe and red. These are the native deer species, and it's thought that in total there's up to 1 million deer now roaming Scotland, undeterred, freely eating whatever they want. It has never been a harder time to be a tree sapling here in Scotland. And why are there so many deer in Scotland? Well, Fundamentally, it's down to the tradition of hunting. Hunting estates, if there's a lot of deer that can easily be shot, the estate is going to be worth more. Equally well, this explosion in deer numbers has been due to the eradication of predators like the wolf, which would directly hunt the deer and keep their numbers in check. Ecosystems are incredibly complex. One of the most important discoveries in understanding how they work is that of trophic cascades. This is where a powerful ripple of indirect interactions take place when a key species is either suppressed or brought back to a system. The most famous example is wolves returning to Yellowstone National Park. I'm sure many of you have seen the video, How Wolves Change Rivers. It explains the story of Yellowstone, how they were reintroduced after a 70-year absence, and immediately they started to hunt elk, killing a few but fundamentally changing their behaviour. And much like deer in Scotland, before wolves they were mindlessly grazing, eating everything. But after the return of wolves, a key predator, they no longer kept their heads down. They moved a lot more. In fact, they completely avoided easily accessible areas, like along rivers, and it was here that trees like aspen and willow were able to recover. And as the foundation of the ecosystem came back, so too did life above, with wetland engineering beavers bouncing back and the rivers themselves stabilising and setting in their course. In recent years there has been some criticism and evidence which suggests that the trophic cascade at Yellowstone was exaggerated, and that the recovery of species like aspen was overstated by sampling only the tallest trees. But nonetheless, no one disputes that a trophic cascade took place following the wolves' return. The question is will we see a trophic cascade in Scotland? Before we answer this question, I think there's some more fundamental ones to address, like, is there enough space in Scotland? Is there enough suitable habitat? And if wolves can return, how many? Now, it is kind of obvious, but I'll say it anyway. There is more than enough food for wolves to eat in Scotland, and it will come in the form of red and roe deer. They're in their hundreds of thousands here in Scotland, and they would support a viable wolf population for decades, if not centuries. And what about the landscape of Scotland? Is it suitable for wolves? Well, you know what? It's not ecologically optimal, but for a wolf, a highly adaptable species that was really heavily persecuted throughout mainland Europe, it was pushed into the fringes and it was able to hold on. So in Scotland, with the abundance of deer, I think they'll do just fine. But what about space? Is there enough space to support a population of wolves here in Scotland? Well, looking to Europe again, on the Norwegian and Swedish border, there is an area about the size of the Highlands that is supporting wolves. And in northern Spain, there is an area that's only a little bigger than that of the Highlands, which supports over 2,000 wolves. The Highlands could support up to 500 wolves, but modelling suggests that around 250 would be optimal to avoid inbreeding. But regardless, it would take decades to get to these numbers from a founding population. And the important thing is that even with just a few wolves, a trophic cascade can still happen. And with this in mind, how would things play out in Scotland? Well, I don't think it's a straightforward answer. I think it's very easy to get excited by Yellowstone and directly compare it to Scotland and say, well, if it happened there, it'll happen the same here. But the key thing to remember between Yellowstone and Scotland is that wolves were missing from Yellowstone for decades, whereas they've been missing here in Scotland for centuries. Let's first consider the natural regeneration of trees, so trees coming back by themselves. In areas where you've got fragmented populations of Caledonian pine forest, oak, hazel, birch, whatever the native tree species is, if you've got trees there and you limit the effects of grazing, natural regeneration will take place. But in areas like this, where it's so heavily degraded, up on the hillsides, where there is literally no native trees left, I think recovery is going to be a lot slower. In fact, it might take people going out and planting trees, but if you can limit that grazing, if you can limit that pressure, they're going to grow back. So this is Loch Awe. I'm pretty well up there in Scotland now. I'm pretty far north, and I'm actually in awe of how much of a great example this is of what Scotland should look like. These islands have been free of overgrazing. The deer, the sheep, they cannot get to it because it's just an island out in the middle of the loch. Look at how well it's covered in trees, and it's not the only one. There's deer all throughout these hills. You can hear them groaning and roaring, and they've been nibbling away at this for centuries. But this bit, nah, they haven't got to that just yet. I don't think they know how to row a boat, to be honest with you. I've come to a beautiful section of the Spey and the Feshie. This is the confluence where the two rivers meet. And I tell you, it is just, I'm so happy to be here right now. This kind of thing just fills me with hope. This is exactly what we need to be seeing along our rivers. Here you have beautiful oaks, you have birch, you have rowan, you have aspen growing, you have parts of trees just falling down. You have this leaf litter everywhere. These leaves and these twigs, when they blow and they fall into the rivers, they just enrich them. They feed all of the macroinvertebrates, the very base of that food chain. So all the fish will be thriving because they're able to feed on the invertebrates, and the invertebrates are thriving because of the trees. I'm just so excited to have found this because these are two of my favorite things. Two of my favourite species, really. You've got aspen and you've got beavers. We haven't actually got beavers, but you've got the next best thing, signs of beavers. The reason why beavers are so incredible is because they are, like aspen, a keystone species. They have a huge effect on the rest of the ecosystem around them. Beavers, yeah, they come along, they chop down trees, they build dams, they build their lodges, and when they do this, they engineer the water around them. They create pools, they create new habitats and niches for so many other animals to thrive. And aspen, well, the reason why we love aspen is because it is a colonizing species. It is such a versatile and resistant species that it can do so well at colonizing rivers like this. And look, here's the thing, here's where wolves come into all of this. These naked rivers that just cover so much of Scotland, if you're able to limit the grazing pressures and you're able to introduce species like aspen, a fast-growing species that will colonize an area quickly, I don't see why these rivers can't be rejuvenated. And then, you know, after a decade or two, once the aspens come up, why can't beavers move in and start engineering? And soon you have these layers being put back into the trophic system, and it's just such an exciting thing. We've spent centuries now with our apex predators in our landscapes, and I think because of this, we have forgotten what it truly feels like to live with an apex predator. And I think that in the zeitgeist, in the wider public perception, especially in Britain, wolves are going to be dangerous, and that's why they haven't come back. You know, this really couldn't be further from the truth. Let's look to Europe, where wolves were able to hold on. They were able to evade complete extinction. And over the past 4 decades or so, they have been making a recovery. In this time, there hasn't been a single fatal wolf attack on a person. Wolves don't go after people. Look, I'm not saying that that's always the case, but generally, if you're living in an area where there's wolves, you are going to be fine. But a feud which has been simmering between people and wolves. When I say people, I mean farmers and I mean hunters. These two industries, there has been this feud simmering. It's as old as time. And recently in Europe, this simmer has began to bubble over once again. Essentially what's happening in Europe, there has been a vote really recently, like in the past couple of weeks, there has been votes to downlist the wolf from strictly protected to just protected. And this is, you know, the wolf is already, with this strict protection, it's already being illegally persecuted and hunted. If we limit the protection on it now, it's only going to get worse. And look, this isn't about being tree huggers, this isn't about being like pro-nature, just in one camp. Wolves, the evidence is irrefutable. They make our habitat so much wilder, and our landscapes, when they are wilder, they are healthier. And a healthier landscape is a better landscape for people to live in. In fact, without the health of the landscape, people won't survive. And while this might not be a problem over the next 50 to 100 years in our lifetimes, what about the next 1,000, 2,000? If we carry on in this way, what is the world going to look like? Some people might think that that's not their problem, but it really is. But what about for the UK and Scotland specifically? Well, while we are a little bit behind Europe in the sense that we don't have the wolf and our landscapes just aren't as wild, we don't have the same potential, we don't have the same scale that you can get in mainland Europe, I'm still optimistic. I think we have an immense opportunity to create a wilder nation. This is the thing about rewilding Britain. It's going to happen because of people. It's not going to happen because wolves wander back in and all these animals can come back in. We're an island habitat. We make the choices here in the UK. And I think that's an incredible opportunity and one that we must take. I think fundamentally, if any animal is going to come back to Scotland, there needs to be a shift in the monopoly of the landscape. Right now, there's a few key industries which are really just kind of dominating the whole thing. You've got agriculture, sheep farming, you've got forestry, and you've got hunting. And of those industries, probably the key one to address is sheep farming. Sheep are everywhere in Scotland. They're everywhere in Britain. In the UK, we've got something like 32 million sheep, and in Scotland alone, it's like 8 million. Many of these sheep are free roaming, and they have been for centuries, if not thousands of years. Look, here's the thing about sheep. Once upon a time, they were an empire building species. The wool trade was staggering, you know, wars were fought over wool, and today it's worth nothing. Sheep farmers make a loss on their sheep. Generally, it is an industry which is heavily subsidized, so it gets a lot of government payments just to make it profitable. Farmers aren't the enemy. I absolutely hate this feud between rewilders and between farmers. Farmers, like most people, are just honest people. They want to make a living. So why not, like, why doesn't the government just buy the sheep off them and then pay the farmers to rewild? And as for the industry of hunting, there is an argument to be said both ways for it. Stuff like driven grouse hunting, where you have to burn entire sections of the landscape just to maintain it in an early successional stage so that it's good for the grouse, and then you can go out there and shoot them. Like, that kind of thing, that can get lost, that can be left in the past. But when it comes to culling deer in Scotland, it is necessary, because we haven't got wolves, we haven't got other apex predators that can do it. We've created this situation where we are the only ones. So there's an argument that until we put wolves back, we have to do it. But here's the thing, I don't want to do trophy hunting. You don't have to go out and shoot the biggest stag that you can. I think that can be left in the past as well, or that can be done in a very small way. I think if we are going to go out and shoot deer, let's shoot it. Let's get that meat into the local community in an affordable way. The reality is if we want to see the landscape recover, there needs to be less deer. And as for the forestry industry, well, look, I do have strong feelings about this, but in the context of the wolf, as much as I would love to see wolves running through rivers surrounded by broadleafs or a Caledonian pine forest, if wolves have to come back and just live in conifer plantations, then I'll take that. And look, going through all of this, it might seem like an impossible idea to see wolves in Scotland anytime soon. And the reality is it's going to take time. It is going to take time, but there are some stepping stones which we can take along the way in order to get there. And one of them is to reintroduce the lynx. Now, the lynx is an apex predator. It is a missing species from the British landscapes, but it isn't going to cause a trophic cascade. There's just no way that if you put lynx back, they might take a few deer, but it's just not going to have the same impact that wolves have. But what a lynx will do is it will warm the British public, these industries which we've spoken about, like agriculture. It'll warm them round to the idea of living with other apex predators like wolves and like bears. I'm not saying we should bring bears back anytime soon, but the lynx is the first step. And then of course we've got stuff like this, like people talking about it, whether if it's online, whether if it's in person. Conversations, like creating like a social movement, is like so key to something like rewilding. Like shifting these preconceived ideas around wolves is only going to be done through conversation and education. So if you've enjoyed this video, then please do the YouTube things. I also have a Patreon where you can go and support, and I'm also working on developing this out to be something which is more than just like supporting Leaf Curious. I want it to be helping loads of other NGOs and like rewilding causes. Go and check out Magic Minds, see what they can offer you. I've put them in the top of the description. Go and check them out. But in the meantime, I'm gonna just explore this beautiful habitat here, and I'll see you in the next one. Leaf Curious.